Good evening. Welcome to the RSU 5 Board of Directors meeting. It is Wednesday, February 3rd, 2021, and we are at the Freeport High School. We have all of our board members here in attendance. Our student rep isn't with us this evening, and Maura and Susanna are joining us virtually. So we are going to quickly go through the hear and be heard portion here. Jeremy.
Present.
Thank you. Candy.
Yes.
Lindsay.
Here.
Jen.
Yes.
Susanna.
Yes.
Angela. Here. Beth.
Yes.
Maura.
Yes.
I'm here. That wasn't a question, that was a statement. Vali.
Yep.
Maddie.
Yes.
And no student rep tonight. Okay. Thank you for that, and we will get started with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we don't have any minutes for this evening. Adjustments?
We have 2 adjustments. We don't have any student rep, so there won't be a report from the student rep. But we do have a good news presentation by the high school principal, Jen Gulko.
Okay. And we'll put that under the good news and recognition, so
Yes.
we'll move right into that. Jen, if you want to.
Too short, I think, for this. Good evening. I'm over here, I guess. Our student reps send their apologies for not coming. I promised Liam that I would say lots of good things happening. They're very happy to be in the second half of the year, officially. Monday was the start of the second semester. That athletics are starting, and lots of good things happening around the building. Tonight, I am very pleased to celebrate one of our FHS students, Cooper Estes Jordan, for his outstanding contribution to community service. Cooper's story about adopting his dog Lucy won a grant through Petco that will benefit the Mid-Coast Humane Society. And Mid-Coast Humane Society is one of 50 animal shelters and rescue leagues across the country that was selected by Petco. And it was the Petco Foundation's Holiday Wishes grant campaign. So there were 7,000 applications, and Cooper was his story was one of 50 winners out of the 7,000. And the campaign awards anywhere from $5,000 to $100,000 to the Humane Society. I'm not sure what the dollar amount is that Mid-Coast got, but they are, I'm sure, just over the moon with this donation. And we are very proud of Cooper's accomplishment and for the work that he's helping do for animals each day. And unfortunately, Cooper couldn't be with us tonight, so I let his family know that we will get the certificate to him. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jen. Who doesn't love a good puppy story, right? That must be a really impressive puppy story. 7,000. All right, so moving on to public comment. We have public comment here in person as well as public comment via the Zoom. I'm looking at Jen to see if we have anybody. Nope, okay. So there will be another public comment at the end of our agenda. So if you had something you want to share and missed this one, you'll have another opportunity. But we are moving right along through our agenda. We don't have a report from the superintendent. That's still true, right?
Just a brief budget update. Oh,
You get-
I'm already on the second page.
I have
I'm
to.
sorry.
I'm a linear thinker.
I know.
I have to follow the agenda.
I'm just feeling hopeful for early night tonight.
Oh, well, now you jinxed it. Okay, we have no administrative reports, no board comments or committee reports, and no policy review. So we will move on to the budget update. Superintendent Foley.
Oh, thank you. I just have one brief update this week. We will have an updated packet for you next week. And I also wanted to report out that we did receive our subsidy numbers, and unfortunately, we'll be receiving about $350,000 less in subsidy, and that's because of an increased valuation in our towns. We've got declining enrollment, and we also have our debt declining. So we will, of course, that will kind of negatively impact, or it shifts the burden more to the local taxpayer. But those are all of my updates for this evening.
Okay. Well, then we will turn it over to Principal Pidden for the Durham Community School budget presentation.
I do want to just say that on the agenda, Becky, it said you'd talk for 10 minutes, which I had counted on as prep time. So if you want to go for another 8 minutes, I'll just get myself organized over here. And also, just want to say hello to Candice behind the post. We'll get there. So I believe everyone has the form in front of you. I'm going to just start off, talk a little bit about the pieces you added for us last year and the impact those investments have had for us this year. And I think of all years, and I appreciate the forward thinking that the group did last spring, because there was an emphasis about already the concerns of what potentially might be. But it was obviously, as we were working through this, the budget evolved through the pandemic and the full remote learning last spring. And the support that was provided around social-emotional support, support provided around helping families by expanding our pre-K program, all were very beneficial to us how we moved through this year. So last year we added this 0.5 of guidance. I'm going to speak to that again in a moment when we talk about this year's budget. But as we said at the time, part of this was around an equity issue across schools. But it was also, just from a very practical perspective, it's this reality of pre-K through 8 school and the different needs of the children across that sort of age span. So on one hand, we have to provide guidance support for families who are just starting out with their children on their educational journey as they enter as 4 and 5-year-olds into either pre-K or kindergarten. And at the other end of the spectrum, we're helping families as they make that transition with their students to high school. And they're very different demands. But what would also pull upon that is the nature of the children we have in school. So our guidance program with our younger children, as we've said before, is really a proactive approach. So there's a lot of specific lessons and pieces that we're working on, teaching into the core values and the expectations for students. And then with our middle school age children, for early adolescence, whilst there is still a proactive element, a big part of it also then becomes sort of a responsive element, and being available and able to support students in the moment as they are starting to navigate early adolescence and some of the complexities that can bring for children and for families. So by adding that half-time guidance, that's really allowed us to address those issues. And this year also being able to support families with a lot going on. There's a lot of challenges, as I'm sure you all know, but there's a lot of challenges for families with children in hybrid learning, trying to juggle jobs and being a parent and just being an individual. So there's been also a lot of family support this year. We added a half-time pre-K teacher and a half-time pre-K ed tech. This brings up our capacity to 48 pre-K children. Our grade level spans range generally from 40 to 50. So this does allow us, for the most part, to be able to offer universal pre-K for children. We did have quite a few families in pre-K opt out of school early on. There are some concerns with younger children and starting out with the pandemic as it was in the fall. but we have still been able to run the 3 programs, 2 morning programs and 1 afternoon program. And we're looking to sustain that because we really think it's going to make a huge difference. And we've already seen that with the students we have and the benefits of the half-day program, being able to see some really big gains in their phonics work compared to previous years already. And then the other piece that we added at DCS was sort of a reassignment within the district, which was adding in some library ed tech support, again, with 10 grade levels of book collection to navigate and manage. It was very difficult for our librarian, who also teaches across all 10 grade levels, to manage the collection. And so having this support of this 0.4 person has been great help. And again, in this particular year of all years, because we have a sort of a sitting process for the books when they get returned, it also has helped to then get books back out in a timely manner once they've gone through their own sort of quarantine. Contact tracing for books. So, those were last year's additional staff impacts, and thank you for that support. It's made a big difference this year. When we look at this school year coming, you'll see right there, the top one is guidance 0.5 position. This is not another 0.5 position. It was that when we revisited the budget as we were trying, as you recall, to make it as manageable as possible for the communities, we were able to access some of the money that came in from the CARES Act support, and that guidance position got funded out of CARES Act funding for this current year. However, the need still exists, even though the external funding source won't be there. So we are back just saying this is a piece that we added for this current school year. It's proven its worth. It's still a necessity from both a programming need and sort of an equity need. So that is why you're seeing it again this year. I'm going to come back to the literacy RTI in a minute, because this is one where Becky's like, you might need a drawing, and I didn't prepare a drawing. So I'm going to stick with the simple stuff before I completely mess it up. The civil rights team, you're going to hear this theme from all the schools as we go through. We don't have stipended positions for these roles. We have fitted them in within our school day currently, but as we look to make this a more systemic and structural component of all our district work, across the schools, we've really identified the need to have specific civil rights team with specific leaders that we're not dependent on either fitting some time in the day or having people volunteer. So at DCS, we're looking for 2 positions, so we can support our younger students and our older students. And again, I think you're going to find that's a theme across all the schools as it comes up. So spoiler alert. The increase the number of hours of administrative support. There's been growing demands placed upon our administrative assistants, just with the sort of compliance paperwork that continues to increase, and also as some of the balance from central office demands are placed upon them continue to grow. And so some of the budget software, everything, there seems to be a correlation between things getting easier, simultaneously more time demanding. But and that may just be the role of technology. But there has been increasing demands. And as we were looking at this, because you may remember a few years ago, I came and asked for a couple of extra days one summer for our administrative assistant, I think it was 2 years ago, to help us as we were restocking some classroom libraries. When we did some research this past fall on looking at this to ensure that this actually fit within the parameters of the district view, we found that the administrative assistant at DCS was actually on a 37.5-hour week, where some of our other administrative assistants are a 40-hour week. So just getting that aligned with the other positions will address those needs for us at school. So the literacy RTI position, the reason this is a little complicated to explain is just because it's sort of an add and a reduction sort of simultaneously. So it ultimately is an add more than a reduction. When we added in this school year a pre-K teacher at a half-time position and a pre-K ed tech at a half-time position, it was a challenge to be able to hire somebody because pre-K is a growing requirement in schools, and also there's also an increasing number of privately run preschools, and so hiring good pre-K teachers is difficult, and when it's half-time, it becomes very difficult. So what we were able to do this year, we took an existing, beg your pardon, I should add, so hiring a half-time ed tech can also be difficult. It feels like, oh, it should be easy. There might be somebody who just wants to work half-time, but the reality is they really aren't, and those who do tend to want to work a couple of days a week, not 5 mornings. So what we did is we took an existing literacy RTI ed tech position that we didn't fill, and then we put half of that to the pre-K teacher and half of that to the pre-K ed tech, so at least they could have full-time roles. It meant the ed tech is a full-time ed tech, half pre-K, half literacy RTI. It meant the teacher was half a teacher and half an ed tech, half pre-K teacher, afternoon literacy ed tech. We adapted our literacy RTI in our elementary grades to accommodate that, and the model has worked fine. The challenge is if we end up with a situation next year, if we keep the same model, where we're asking somebody to be half teacher salary and half ed tech salary in a competitive market. The teacher, regardless of who that person would be, the emphasis in our pre-K is both on purposeful play, but also on phonics and sounds acquisition, which is also their area in kindergarten where if they're not acquiring it, we start to really increase the support and intervention to get them caught up as soon as possible. So what we'd like to do is be able to make that position next year half-time pre-K teacher, half-time literacy RTI teacher. And what we would remove is half of the half-time ed tech. So it would be switching a half-time ed tech role into a half-time teacher role. I'm perfectly happy to try and explain that in another way if that was too confusing. Does that make sense? Enough sense? Okay, great. And for you, Becky, how about you? Were you able to get that? All right.
If he had those extra 8 minutes you promised him, he probably could have come up with the diagram.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. Even simple sentences drag on for me, so when they get a bit more complex, it really becomes problematic. So those are the staffing impacts. Then you'll see at the very end of that second page, software technology subscriptions. These have been sort of scattered in different lines. We're trying to get this really tightened down. We've become very aware of it, as you can imagine, over the last 11 months through remote instruction, synchronous instruction, and it's been great learning. I mean, I think the transfer on the other side of all this will be helpful because we'll be able to apply it even more effectively with children full time. But we have increasingly seen the benefit of having shorter term, easier to administer sort of progress monitoring assessments. And by progress monitoring, it means where's this child right now? How are they doing? How have they progressed? Without some of our slightly longer, more time-consuming sort of benchmarking assessments, which is where we're actually saying, hold on, let's pause for a moment and see where this child is relative to our expectations. This gives us ongoing progress monitoring as we go. So there's some software impacts there that we've been using, again, where a lot of it was discounted or available through grant funding, through CARES funding, but that we think are sort of integral parts of our work moving forward, and therefore there'll be some additional requests for software and technology. Not hardware, just access to web-based service. You'll see in our student enrollment that the numbers break down. It's ironic that I didn't put a total, but the number is about 9 more students this year, for next year than this current year, really shifting from the estimate of what's coming into pre-K relative to 8th grade exiting. So within the rest of the school, we're a little tight. We're not worried about 7th grade at 22s, that's fine. The 5th grade, if we were to suddenly get a whole bunch more, it could get complicated. And 1st grade at 20s, we're fine, but as you know, we have these sort of awkward numbers at our school. So if we have suddenly a rush of 1st graders move in, that could start to become an area we have to focus on. But equally, if we had students move out in a couple of other areas, that might make those more accessible. So we feel like we've got the balance. There just may be some fine tuning as we get closer to beginning. Okay, any questions?
Well, people are thinking, I had one just about the pre-K estimate. Is that an estimate, or is that already registered?
That is not already registered, but what we tend to use, we look at live birth data, and although obviously children do move between 0 and 4, it's usually a pretty accurate representation for sort of pre-K and K enrollments in terms of large or small. So that is based on what we looked at for live births, and so again, there's a couple of families whose children are very much on the young side, who did not come to pre-K this year, who have also inquired about actually having their children start pre-K this coming September. We usually communicate to families that you can't do 2 years of pre-K because we can't not have a spot for someone who hasn't had access to it. So if you think if your child's real young and you're unsure, and you're thinking about holding them back for some reason, do it at the beginning and then they come into pre-K. But this group, because some of them chose to stay out, we're also expecting a few extra pre-K in that number that might then impact the kindergarten number.
Vali.
And Will, for the rest of the grades, you're assuming that we will get back the students that we lost this year who are homeschooling or doing remote? So
Yes.
we're basically picking up from a year prior to this year and just extrapolating those numbers?
Well, we've also had families move in. So we have some families moved in who have gone straight into remote school. We have a family starting March 1st who are moving up. So yes, we checked with the homeschool families, all of whom plan to return, and remote families likewise. What I will say, we have, which might impact all of us. I'm not sure how one would check this, but the families who've been moving in this school year are, in previous years, I would say it might be within state movement or through circumstance to move in with family, but from within state. The last 3 families who've moved in have come from New York, Florida, and Alabama. So whether we continue to see people moving from other parts of the country to Maine, then it might be that we see that impact continuing. If we're seeing it in January and February, that may impact all of us. But again, that's purely an assumption. But it is a different pattern than we've seen in previous years in terms of where people are moving from during the school year. Any other questions?
Questions for Will? Oh, Maura has one.
Thanks, Will, for your thoughtful presentation. I just had a question about pre-K as well. Could you remind me, we don't have universal pre-K, meaning everyone who wants it can get it, but is everyone who wants it getting it in Durham because of the level of demand? Thank you.
Yes, so at 1.5 positions, for the most part, Maura, we anticipate that would provide universal pre-K because of our numbers, as you'll see there, generally range from 40 to 50 students. So whilst, looking at that list in our projected, only 2 grade levels would have been higher than 48 in terms of access to pre-K. So we do think that 1.5 positions, well, according to this, 80% of the time would give us universal pre-K. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Okay.
Mara, I think we did have universal pre-K this year and maybe even last year. In the sense of, I think we were able to provide them a space somewhere in the district. They might not have been in the community where they live.
Do you mean in all
okay.
3 towns?
Yes.
Okay.
Is that,
okay.
is that your memory, Will?
Well, it not, although, so yes, at panel, I think at Moore Street, everybody who wanted came, but there isn't a slot for what becomes the enrollment for kindergarten, I believe. So whether that means that historically there's a number of families who choose not to go to the school pre-K, but because they have other requirements, then I'm not sure that I don't think we declined anybody.
Correct. And this year, for sure, I don't think we declined
Right.
anyone, did we?
No, definitely, we still have slots. Okay.
Just a quick question, Will. Just on the numbers piece of it, and maybe this is more of a question for Becky, but back to the halftime literacy RTI teacher versus the ed tech. So when I look at the overview sheet in the addition, that's a full-time literacy it's the full amount of a half-time literacy teacher, and that's netted against the DCS ed tech in the reductions, yeah?
That's correct.
Okay, so it's just the difference between those 2 salaries that is the addition to the budget from
That's
this?
correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Going easy on you, Will. It's because we're just getting warmed up for Ray. Okay, Freeport Middle School.
Ray Grogan, Freeport Middle School principal. Everyone has the budget sheet in front of you, but I'll give the quick highlights. For this year and for next year, the proposed budget definitely allows our class sizes to stay between the 18 and 21 number, which is something we're very excited about. Last year in the budget, we added a halftime math ed tech to help support our 8th graders because that wasn't a service we had for the 8th graders, but we had it for the 6th and 7th graders. Really due to the pandemic, that person is doing quite a bit more RTIB around executive functioning and working with the students around that because not being in school every day, more of the executive functioning issues are coming to the table. But we really need to kind of see that position in its intended form with all the kids in the building before we need to we can know if it's effective or not, but it has been hugely important in its kind of morphed role with the pandemic for us this year. And, really it's been a lifesaver to a lot of 8th grade students to have that person working with our kids. The changes to the budget last year were the halftime RTI ed tech, and then we did a reduction of a half teacher last year, and that was due to enrollment changes. And then the staffing adjustments for this year are we are looking to have a civil rights team stipend. We do have that position now with a teacher who is volunteering, who does some of the stuff during the day and some of the stuff after school, but like Will said, to make it sustainable over time and to have more of it come outside of the school day. And then they would bring stuff back into the school day for the whole school, that stipend is in there. And then the other stipend that we are requesting is a technical director for our drama. And this person would help with the drama production at the middle school, working on the technical side, which might be the sets, might be the dancing, it might be the sets, it could be anything, how the drama director sees that fit. And that is the quick summary of the Freeport Middle School budget requests.
Questions for Ray? Molly?
Thank you, Ray. Question about the late bus. I recall that we removed it from the budget last year when we made those cuts. And there was mention made of not a full bus, but the smaller vehicles. I don't know how you call those
So,
being used.
Yeah, the late bus has been brought up since Pownell
Right.
joined us at the middle school 10 years ago. And it was originally, we talked about being in the budget, and then, when, working on the budget together, it was something that Dennis really felt that he could provide for us this year without additional funding. But just with the way buses and bus drivers and everything are, it really hasn't started yet. So it's something that, I've talked to Dennis, and he's confident, next year once we're through the pandemic, or pandemic looks different, that, hopefully we can have that up and running.
So you're not making a request through middle school, but Dennis will make that request then?
No, he thinks I think he thinks within all of his positions in a normal year, he could have
Okay.
it.
So
could
what he
provide
said
it
he
for
could
us.
do this year, he believes he can do next year.
So last
without adding-
January,
Okay.
none of us thinking pandemic, Dennis was pretty confident that this would be up and running this school year for us.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Maddie?
Thanks, Ray. I have a couple questions about the technical director for drama. First question is that to help also create a pathway with students who are interested in technical stuff before they go
It's
up to
definitely
high school?
working with students.
Great.
One of the things, and I hope I said that in there, that it'll allow more students to access that, and and even the students that we have, more time, because a lot of times that part does get cut from the kids with that. So hopefully it will allow more students, and the students that are there, more time on that side.
Yeah, that's great, because there's a lot going on at the high school. It'd be nice to get their feet wet early. And my other question might be for Becky or you. I said to you privately after last week's meeting that I really appreciate that you all discussed my continued suggestion for an arts director. I'm thrilled that you discussed it. And it's for a situation like this. I see that you're requesting this help to the drama department, and I know that there are requests that we don't get to see that come up through the high school that have not yet been filled. So I'm wondering if there's some level of working together for some of these arts requests, where you all are aware, like Jen and Ray and others may be aware of what the need is, and you're making a decision not just at a school level, but at a district level for what requests should come forward and what the priority is?
And so your question is for us to make you aware of those requests, or?
I was wondering if that's happening. Is there some discussion that is, when Ray brings this request to a meeting with you, is there an opportunity for all the principals to say, well, I have a similar stipend request, and let's talk about district-wide how we prioritize these around the arts?
So, for example, with this one, there was definitely the whole administrative team discussed it, and there was a discussion about whether we felt that there was a need at other schools for a similar type stipend, and at this point, there's not. I hope I'm answering your question. So,
You are.
yes,
It may not be a similar type stipend. That's what I'm blinking at. Yeah, I just hope there's the opportunity to review all this in a bucket, so this would be an arts bucket, this would be a performing arts bucket.
So,
go ahead, Ray.
well, I think that when, stipend ideas come up, because typically the stipends will come from a parent, a student, a teacher, someone like that, and then you start kind of brainstorming those ideas and, what that would look like. And I would say, typically then it, or actually always, if you put something in your budget, every single other principal is going to see it, which leads to that bigger conversation. But, especially like at the middle level, I think Will and I rarely have ever added a stipend at one of our schools that we hadn't talked extensively, the two of us together, when we were implementing that, at the middle level with that.
Yes, so I would agree with Ray that all of these, any new position that you see, every administrator is aware of the ask, before it's put into the budget, because we spend at least one meeting, if not two, just brainstorming. What are the needs at your school? And then that provides an administrator an opportunity to say to somebody, oh, I've never thought of that. And even the civil rights, we had a good discussion around that about, well, normally there isn't a civil rights team at a school like pre-K to 2, like Julie's school. But the team works very cohesively, collaboratively together. And so through that discussion, we decided, hey, why not try it? It'll look a little bit different. But with each position, other principals are able to ask the principal, what are you doing with that? Do I have a similar need? And I think you saw that a couple of years ago around the RTIB, right? One school started it one year. We looked at how it went. And then the following year, the other principals wanted to hear about it. And then there was like a kind of group request that year. I think we had 3 that we requested that year. So there is that opportunity.
Are they good online? Okay.
Thank
Thanks,
you
Ray.
very much.
All right, next up is, it's like the Jen Goko show tonight. You start, you're in the middle, you finish. Freeport High School.
And Will says if I talk a lot, I get 2 chocolate chip cookies instead of 1. I'll start with our the impact of our budget requests last year. We were really excited to have a 1.0 math position added last year. As you know, what I presented last year was that enabled us to not only maintain class sizes, but also maintain the support in the math lab. And as I've shared before, we have some students who drop into the math lab that anybody who has a study hall can access it. And then we also have students assigned to the math lab. And so it's great to have one of our math teachers staff the math lab, and we have almost every period on both color days staffed in the math lab, which is great. The other thing that we're really excited about that just started on Monday is we started our entrepreneurship class, which is a math elective that Mr. Berkemeyer is teaching. And so if any of you are Shark Tank fans, it's along the lines of Shark Tank, where kids have to generate a product and learn about marketing and all the pieces of math that go behind it. So the addition of the math teacher has enabled us to not only to maintain support, but also to expand our offerings, which has been wonderful. The 0.5 ed tech position has enabled us that we have guided study halls every period, every color day, and both color days. And then we've also been able to provide extensive learning lab class periods, which the learning lab is, the guided study hall is where our 9th graders go, which is a smaller, more focused study hall in a classroom with a staff member, and then the Learning Lab is even smaller than that. We cap it in a non-COVID year at 12 students, so we're at about 5 or 6 per cohort day, and that's where they're getting intensive support. But unbeknownst to us, last year in the budget process, this additional ed tech has also enabled us to check in with kids who are remote. So when we're finding out that kids are really struggling at home on their day that the cohort's not in school, then we have some ed techs that are available to reach out to them remotely. Sometimes it's just a quick check-in to see how they're doing at home, but that's been great to be able to have that. And then the addition of the 0.5 special ed social worker I shared last time, 2 weeks ago, I think it was, that has really enabled us to expand services, more drop-in opportunities for students to meet with our social workers. And our special ed social worker has dedicated a great deal of time of working with our Choices program. And so because she's our new social worker, is working with a smaller population of students, they're getting to know her well and quickly this year. So most of our Choices students are here 5 days a week, as well as our life skills, the Bridges program. So the new social worker, Megan Kemna, she works with students in both of those programs. So we were certainly grateful, and there has been significant impact from our request from last year. For this year, we have, it's kind of funny that I'm requesting a 0.1. It's not like a really short time that I'm asking. It's that we had a 0.4 position and a 0.5 position. We have struggled to hire, as Will was explaining with his position, that a 0.4 is not always the most attractive position to hire. And as you know, there are lots of ed tech openings in lots of schools. And so this will enable us to turn this either into 2.5 positions or 1. We're hoping for 1 full-time position. And so then that would be expanding what I was explaining about learning lab sections, guided study halls, and support, RTI support for students. And then we are also requesting for a civil rights stipend. You know, I won't repeat what the other 2 principals said, but what I would say is that at the high school, it has been driven by student interest, whether we have a civil rights team. They changed the name. I think it's been 3 different names in the 6 years that I've been here. And, you know, it's an important part of our school culture that kids are able to approach us and that our clubs exist based on student interest. But one of the things that I have shared before is that we want to ensure that a civil rights team exists, whether there's student interest or not. And so I think that having the stipend position will ensure that we are working to recruit kids for this club every year and keeping that consistent. We do have an active civil rights team this year, and our advisor is volunteer. They actually met today. So it was a small turnout for the meeting, but all of the advisories watched the I Have a Dream speech, and then an advisory on Monday, and then unfortunately they were supposed to watch it yesterday for the B cohort kids, but we sent it again so they could watch it at home. And then a small group, the whole school was invited who was here for cohort A to discuss today with the civil rights team, and a small group of students turned up, but they said it was a very productive discussion today, which is great. Those are our requests. Oh, sorry. The other significant need down at the bottom is that, as you know, the state has decided that the SAT is no longer our mandatory 11th grade test. And so it is a significant cost to test all of our juniors for the SAT. There are some schools that are now saying that it is optional, but not all schools are saying that. And we also feel that you know, some of the research has shown that if students take the SAT and have the scores under their belt, that some, not all, but some are more likely to even just apply to school. And so we really feel strongly that we have been well supported here. We've tested all of our kids for the PSAT, and we would like to do that for the SAT. So because it's a fairly expensive test for individual students. And then the textbook scanner system. This is something that a lot of schools have had for many, many years, but it's just a better, more effective way to track all of our books in school. And the system that we're looking to purchase also tracks. We're so fortunate this year of all of the technology that we've received. It can track the iPads, the Apple Pencils, the document cameras, and it's one system. We purchase it. There's training with that, and then there is a smaller cost each year to keep that up. But we would, I think, in the long run, it would save the district a great amount of money. It would be easier to track the books as they go out and the materials.
Jen.
I just have a question about the SAT not being the mandatory test for 11th graders. So are they going back to having a different test, like that used to be the MEA, correct? So are they doing anything, or are they just like nixing the 11th grade test?
Dr. Foley can answer that if it's been decided.
They're just doing a different test, which they still have not publicized. But it's one that we're very familiar with.
Okay. Just as
and
a
it
comment.
Starts with an N.
Just as a comment on that, I mean, I think that providing that opportunity for kids is just fantastic, especially like you said on equity position, like with how much that test costs. And you know, I know a lot of kids even take it twice. So I mean, at least giving one opportunity, you know, for free, I think it's really important. So I'm glad that you've kept that in there.
And I can thank you, and I can share that this year we've gone back and forth with other Cumberland principals that about to find out what everybody's doing. We have decided to offer the SAT to all of our juniors and pay for it this year. We had I'm not sure if you followed that, due to us going fully remote. At first, we canceled the PSAT, but we wanted to make sure that some scholarships are tied to that kids had an opportunity. And we had about 60 students opt to take it, but that was a significant savings because we usually test around 300 kids for the PSAT. And so shifting some other funds that we aren't going to use this year, we're able to cover the cost of the SAT, which will be April 13th. And we'll use a school day. It's just so much more effective that, you know, I've worked in other high schools where they have to travel to another school, take it somewhere else that's not where they're familiar or comfortable with. And I just think there's a lot of advantages, not just for us paying for it, but for dedicating the time and having it in our school.
Do we pay for the SAT for more than one grade? Because 300 kids sounds like 2 grades to me.
The PSAT,
Yeah,
we
yeah.
do pay for 2 grades. We pay for 10th and 11th graders to take it.
Oh, so they take it in the fall and then take the SATs in the spring.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
the juniors. Yep.
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay.
And and this year we did not offer it to 10th graders because the scholarships are only tied to the PSAT for 11th graders. 10th graders, it's for pure practice. So we're offering them practice tests, resources online, resources on paper, and then they'll be able to take it in October next year when they're juniors, and then they'll take the SAT in the spring.
Beth.
I know we can't predict the future, but going forward, is it something, do you see the SAT like going away? I know that some colleges are saying now it's optional, where before they were very like, you know, you have to have this. So is it something that once we put it in the budget, would we just plan on it for like the next year, or every year would you need to ask for it to pay for the SAT?
That's a great question. I think that, you know, there's a consortium of schools that are nationwide that are talking about the purpose of the SAT and should it continue. But there isn't a great process to replace it, you know. And so I think that right now, Great Schools Partnership is hosting these webinars throughout the year. That's called Reimagining the College Process. So that's really just kind of brainstorming and talking to schools around the country about what they think. But I don't know it might be something that we would have to budget for each year, or the state changes their mind and decides that they're going to pay for it. So I can't predict what it is, but there's a lot of talk of what's the purpose of it. and does it continue?
It's interesting, Beth. I think we had this conversation last week that there was an article about the increase in applications. This was specifically about Harvard, but it was up like 20%, and they said it was primarily driven by the fact that kids didn't have to submit any SAT scores. So my perspective on that is I don't think the colleges will move away from it without something to replace it, because it just adds more work for them.
Yeah.
But I could be wrong. Maddie.
I'm sorry to ask again, but I don't know where I saw it, but I thought I just recently saw that we offer the SAT to seniors in the fall on 2 different dates.
This past fall we did, but they paid for it themselves.
Okay.
So we offered the opportunity. Some schools didn't do any opportunity because it was the beginning of school with the pandemic, and we wanted to make sure that we offered it here. So often kids can take it multiple times. They just have to find other locations to do it. But we did that this year.
You don't think we'll do that? Well, if we do it next year, it would be on their own nickel.
For them to take it, for a senior to take it a second time. Yeah, we have not paid for students to do that. And we usually do a Saturday administration of the senior SAT if we do it. So that's not disruptive to the school day. And kids can apply for a fee waiver. There's a fee waiver which drastically reduces it, but for some it's still a barrier.
Angela?
Just to clarify, maybe Becky, this is for you, was the state used to pay this amount of money to the school district, and so now they're not? Are they converting it to something else, or?
Yes, they're converting it to that other test. That starts with an N and ends with an A.
That doesn't exist, yeah, okay. All right, thank you.
Any other questions for Jen? All right, brief break, Jen, and then you'll be back again.
While Craig's coming up, I wanted to go back to Valley's question about the late bus at the middle school for Pownell. If you remember in my presentation, there is an additional bus driver custodian next year, so I would see that helping to fulfill that need.
Good evening. So I'll start with the first page of the budget presentation. Sometimes it's hard to align athletics with the district's 4 strategic goals, but I think the biggest thing that we do is we can continue to support education-based athletics. And I've said this a number of times, that when our students become 30 and 35 years old and they're beginning a family and buying a home or changing jobs, it really doesn't help them that they can hit a 3-pointer or kick a field goal or kick a soccer ball, but really what really helps them is the intangible characteristics that sports develop, determination, teamwork, all of those types of things. So really that's what I think that we're about. And I think my first 2 handouts, the main learning results and the facts and figures actually support most of what I just said. And I'll be happy to answer any questions you have about that. The staffing adjustments, last year I stood here and asked to increase our funding for an assistant coach that we actually paid a Yarmouth to hire an assistant coach for the additional swimmers that we have, to increase that by just over 2,200 to make that position our varsity swim coach. The benefit of that is a couple things. One, our kids, when they swim with Yarmouth as individual co-op, they don't really count in a meet. If Yarmouth is swimming against Falmouth and our kids are swimming in that meet, we could have a swimmer come in first, but they really don't. They're swimming exhibition. And so becoming a varsity team, our kids actually get their scores count, and we have team score, and they have individual scores as well. And while they're individual co-ops with Yarmouth, they can still qualify for the state championship meet. But I think there's real value in becoming our own team. Had this not been a COVID year, and had swimming turnouts been like they have in the past, there was a real chance that Yarmouth might have said, you know, you've got too many swimmers, I'm not sure we can help you out this year. So I think the second piece is that, you know, funding our own team certainly creates, you know, a definite possibility for our kids. In this presentation or in this proposal, we would have our own swim team for the 21-22 season. We would not host any home meets. That's a significant cost to that. When you have your own team and you rent 2 lanes for practice, that's much different than having to rent the entire facility for a meet. And I'll get to that in the last page with the budget phase-in. So really the only thing I'm adding to the budget or would like to add is just over $2,200 to move, instead of funding Yarmouth's assistant coach, to fund our own varsity swim coach. If you do go to the last page, the budget phase-in, you can see for the last couple of years, we've done a very good job. We've added a significant amount of money starting back in 2010. And every year, we've funded some of those things that the boosters were taking care of. And as you can see, for 21-22, we would up the swim coach, and then for 22-23, that's just an approximate value of what it would cost for home swim meets. And I'll leave it to you folks to ask any questions.
Questions for Craig? Can you remind me how many swimmers we have?
Well, last year we were double digits. This year that's significantly down because there really is no swimming.
Right.
Kids are, both the Yarmouth and Freeport kids, the pool is not being rented out to any groups. They did just secure some time on Sundays in Westbrook as a team, but they can go to the Casco Bay Y as individuals and sign up for training time. So the numbers in both indoor track and swimming, because there really is no indoor track and swimming, those numbers are really down this year.
But we would expect, and do we think that this opportunity creates the potential for more, do you think there'd be more swimmers who would be interested in swimming for a Freeport team as opposed to being exhibitionists? Sounds terrible.
Your words, not mine.
You know what I mean?
Yes, I do. I think, belonging to your own team and having your own colors and scoring, I think that's a lot different experience than being individual co-ops attached to the host school.
How big are other swim teams? I mean, I'm sure there's huge ones, but
it varies. Cape and Greeley both have their own pools, so the number of swimmers that they have, is huge. So, it's pretty much pool driven. If you've got, a pool, it's kind of like ice hockey. If you have access to a rink, then you're going to have more skaters than someone who doesn't have access to a rink.
But we're not going to be like the smallest team out there, right?
To start off with, we'll be one of the smaller ones.
Okay. But we'll grow it. Okay, thanks. Vali.
Thank you, Craig. I have a question, not about your budget proposal, but about this year. With sports being open and closed, have you used all the coach stipends? And do you envision using them all through the end of the year? Or is that money that maybe hasn't been used in its entirety this year?
All fall coaches were paid the full stipend, and all winter coaches will be paid a full stipend, even though we were yellow and we were remote. Part of our return and opening up, there was expectations for them to participate and contact and create those workout opportunities and learning opportunities remotely. And I got to tell you, I was talking to the boys varsity basketball coach the last week of remote, and he said, I can go to work in my classroom for a full day. We're in the middle of the season, and then I can show up at practice, and I can sit down and probably take 15 or 20 minutes to plan out my practice because I know what I've done it, and I can do that. You know, he says, now it's taken me so much longer to find the right videos, the right workouts, to view them, to make sure they're appropriate. It's what I want to do. So, you know, the amount of time that they were putting into what they were doing, they went and searched and got guest speakers, and, you know, it takes time to call and find people who are willing to do that. So, you know, I think the amount of time that some of these coaches put in were probably more than what they did in person.
Thank you.
Can I ask one more question, Craig? How did numbers for the high school only go down by 11 in the fall? Like, didn't we not have like a full football? Like, how did we only go down 11? That's kind of amazing to me. I would have thought it would have gone down, participation would have gone down more.
Football was the team that had the least amount. We had a number of linemen, mostly the upperclassmen, who chose not to play 7-on-7. 7-on-7 is really just passing, and there's no linemen, there's no blocking. So football was really the only one that their numbers were down. Boys soccer had the most turnout we've ever had. We probably would have cut had it not been a COVID year, but we said, you know, we'll just keep them all and try to make them all happy. Field hockey numbers were up. So fall, you know, our numbers were good in the fall.
That's great. Okay, thanks, Craig. Okay, so I know we have programs of study on here, but I did tell you all last week that after you reviewed the documents, if you had any clarifying questions, do you mind if we give people that opportunity, since we seem to be moving along pretty quickly? I just wanted to give people that opportunity. Obviously, we've only heard from 4 of the group heads, so we've got a lot more presentation to go. So if you have a specific question to one of the other areas that might get picked up when they speak to us, but just sort of general questions, if anybody had any. I know we're not a shy group, so I'm sure those questions will come up and we'll get them all answered. I just wanted to, I know I said that last week and I didn't want to go back on what I said and not give you that opportunity. Okay. Sorry, Jen, I tried to give you a little more time to prep, but. Jen says everybody's below their time limit for today, so good job.
No, I'm ready. It's just Will who needed more prep time. Good.
Do you feel that bus, Will? It's one of the new buses. It's gas. It's natural gas powered.
I'm very glad that we didn't print the beautiful copies of the program studies, because there have been changes since you have received it, because we just got edits from Region 10, so we didn't have them in time. So I'll kind of talk you through that. But we only had a couple of places with major changes, so you'll see that a lot of these are some things that we have updated in terms of general information, some COVID information. I'm not sure if this was shared with the board, but we had a admissions rep from Yale University give us some wonderful feedback about just our statement about COVID and how we managed that with the transcripts. And they wrote us back saying they just thought it was very clear and very helpful. So one thing that, before we get into the changes, that I know the last time I was here at the board, there was the question, I believe it was yours, Maddie, about where students go. You know, how are we recognizing 2-year versus 4-year versus military? So that is just for your reference on page 9 of the program of studies, because we include our school profile in there. So it's the image of that. We update this each year. So of the 128 graduates, and I would say, keep in mind that this is the class most impacted so far by COVID. And so these numbers are slightly different from years past. We do, on our guidance website, have all of our profiles from the last few years that you can see. I would just say probably the most significant increase here would be in the gap year, that's a larger percentage than we normally have. So it's out of the 128 students, it's 65% of our kids go to a 4-year college, 11% go to a 2-year, 16% went straight to employment, 6% went to a gap year, and 2% to the armed forces. So the armed forces number is usually pretty consistent, 1 to 2%. And then it fluctuates with number of students attending college versus going straight to employment.
That's 2020, right?
2020.
Okay.
Yes.
It says 2018, just so you know. You might want to edit that before you print them again.
That is already fixed in there too. So I just asked Ginny to reshare this with everybody, so that's been fixed.
Can I ask one question on that?
Of course.
And it kind of tags along with Maddie's. So if someone was going to say, like a certificate program for, I don't know, plumbing or electrician or cosmetology, right? Which bucket do those fall in?
So that is often a 2-year program, considered 2-year college, but not always, because some of them are 6-month programs or things like that. So that is usually lumped in with employment, because a lot of kids are going to employment and then entering those programs as well, or their plan is to do a 6-month HVAC program and then go to work. So they wouldn't be included in that 2-year unless it's an associate's degree that they're going for. So
And
that would be in that 16%.
Are these buckets that we're using here dictated to us by anything like this is how the state does it? Or, I mean, because I think to Maddie's point, it would be great to differentiate that. Like, it's one thing to be just going to work right out of school without any additional, secondary, post-secondary education around it, like the plumbing program or the HVAC. And I would be interested to know what that split is. I don't know, maybe I'm the only one, but just with the goal of trying to understand and promote those programs more, it would be great to know how many kids we have that are already taking advantage of them.
Yeah, we definitely could do that and break that down. I think the only challenge is what I was explaining last time, is that we don't track whether they actually went to those programs.
Yeah, I mean, it's all self-reported,
Yeah.
but I mean, at least it's anecdotal info.
We could definitely do that.
But I guess I would defer to others. I don't want it to be just because I think that's a great idea, but.
I would love to see that, but I would say if it's difficult to actually break it out, I would even just call that bucket employment and certification programs.
Yeah.
Just at least giving
Acknowledge that it's in there,
highlighting it,
yeah.
Sure.
Jen?
And even with that, I was thinking you could, those numbers for an example of someone coming out of Region 10 with a CNA certificate, that may be going directly into employment, but acknowledging that they also were part of a certificate program, I guess, where they could fit in there, because I know they're gonna have the HVAC program, I think, at Region 10. So, I mean, I'm not sure where that fits in, but it would be nice to know even our students that are coming out and going straight into work also have completed some sort of certificate program that is kind of above and beyond the regular, high school diploma.
Yeah. And it might be that, remember, this is where what we're sharing with, the main purpose of the profile is for people to get an at-a-glance at our school, but mostly for college admissions, so that the college admissions department can see, just kind of the trend for that. And so it might be that we recognize that in a different place. So Region 10 at the end of the year lets us know how many people completed a certificate, and then we celebrate that. We've celebrated at our assemblies or through our announcements, but we haven't put it in the profile. So it might just be that we figure out a different place for it to be included as well. But it's definitely something we recognize. Like an example would be the EMT kids. So some kids come out certified from EMT and then go straight to work. Yeah. So that could be definitely good information that we get more specific about.
Yeah, I would assume, I totally understand what you're saying about this is a profile, so I think that would be more for our community.
Yeah.
Something our community would like to know.
And it definitely could go in here in the program of studies, because that's also something that, if I'm looking for something from another high school, that's the first document that I go to. So that's where other people would look. So going back to the list of changes, you'll see that, and there was a question that Maddie had about, the first question was the acronym NDVR is Endeavor. The kids made up that acronym. I still spell it out as Endeavor because families don't often know what I'm talking about. And so that's just something that you'll see throughout. Humanities 9 and 10. So that's one of the changes that we took that out, and the question was what they were and why they were removed. So that was a class that was focused on executive functioning skills, which is really kind of rolled into our partially into our guided study halls and then partially into our learning lab classes. And so we had that class as well as literacy and felt that we didn't need both. And so that our literacy classes are still intact, and those are for our students who are reading below grade level. And the students who need just that executive functioning support, some of them are already in literacy. That's a big part of that literacy class as well. But those are the kids that we're now incorporating into learning labs because we've expanded the ed tech positions to be able to offer that. So the biggest changes, I would say, other than the new changes, will be from Region 10. But there's two things that we're really excited about for the ELA department. One is that we've been talking about this for a few years and are moving forward with offering dual enrollment for our 12th grade English class, which is wonderful. Quantitative reasoning and math right now is the only class that we have as dual enrollment. And not only do they get high school credit for it, but they follow the SMCC curriculum. Our teacher is actually certified. We have 2 this year, 2 math teachers, our remote teacher, Alex Brin, and then our teacher at the high school, Amanda Edwards. And they are considered an adjunct professor at SMCC. They have to go through their curriculum training and their orientation. And so we'll have that in the ELA department as well. So it is actually a semester course in SMCC that we stretch out to a year, which is what a lot of the surrounding high schools do. But something even better is that our new English teacher that we have this year, he is a part-time English teacher and he is already a professor at SMCC. So he's familiar with the curriculum, and he's our 12th grade English teacher. So likely that will be who's teaching the course. And students are still, they're able to not take the dual enrollment. There are some requirements. There's a GPA requirement. There used to be a PSAT requirement, which they have dropped. But it's a GPA requirement and a recommendation, and there is a waiver process for kids to get into that program. So we're really excited to offer that. And then we've added a new English elective, which is called Literature of Society and Self. And we wrestled with the name of this, but really it's about using all different mediums of literature to really analyze the mind, how it impacts society, and then how some of those reflections are turned into action. So there will be some topics about things like mental health. There will be topics about social justice. And so it's the other thing that in the past, there have been, in my opinion, too many electives that were only for the older students. And so this is going to be offered for 10th, 11th, and 12th graders instead of just for the older students. So then some of the other, most of the other classes are slight changes in the course description, changes in the course name. And then what has been added since you received this. So you'll get a new document of the letter of the changes with every page of the changes, and then a new copy of the copy that you have shared electronically. The title is shared with the board. That's already been updated. So Ginny can reshare it, but you already have it. It's more good news from Region 10. They are expanding their dual enrollment offerings. So some of our students are able to get college credits depending on the class. So one class, for example, is creative media, which is the the digital design class that they have, which we have some of our students enrolled in. So they have the opportunity to get college credits for that. And then they have decided to offer the HVAC program, which will be a new program. I think that that is going to be a great program for our kids. It was a void that I think lots of people have voiced to Region 10 of, probably many of us know that that's a job in high demand too. And so we're excited about that program. The Region 10 staff they come to, we're actually going to do it in person, that they're coming to school. They go into every 10th grade class instead of, we usually have an assembly for them to talk about the programs. And so since we're not able to do that, they're going to visit all of the classes and talk about the offerings. So kids will have an opportunity to learn what the HVAC program is. And then I don't know too many details about this. I'm just learning about this now. We've just been emailing it about this at the beginning of this week, is that they are looking to offer social studies and English for 9th and 10th graders. One of the things that has dissuaded us from pushing 9th graders into Region 10 is that they didn't have enough time in their schedule to then get the classes that they need because of the travel time. It takes such a significant portion of their schedule to go to Region 10. And so they tried to offer math. That didn't work. So they're not offering math this year because that would have been one way that kids could have had that class there as well. But if they are able to offer social studies and English, then we can definitely have more 10th graders attend Region 10. And we'll also start to look at our more 9th graders able to participate in a program. So we have not had a student go to Region 10 for 4 years here. And so we could start to look at that to see if that's a possibility for some students. So I'm sorry, let me see if the other questions. Another question is if AP World is not offered. It is offered. Our new teacher, Jason Willett, is the teacher for that. It's a very small class. It's been small in terms of enrollment of the kids who want to take that class. But it is something. AP US History has a higher enrollment. That's the junior class. But we have offered that every year except 1 year. That was actually Charlie's class, so Charlie Mellon's. But we just didn't have enough kids to enroll it 2 years ago in that class. But it is offered this year and next year. And then the question about the social studies curriculum is under review in the coming months, according to last week's discussion, which I sadly missed. I'm not sure. Can you explain your question?
I was
in terms of equity?
I was just wanting to make sure that review includes the high school curriculum. I was assuming that it does. I just wanted a reminder for the board if that's true.
Yes.
Great, thanks.
And then the question of, have we discussed offering Latin for 8th graders, and knowing that it's a staffing concern. So that hasn't been something that we have discussed. As you know, the Latin program is huge at the high school. It's wonderful. But it's not something that the three principals have talked about in terms of offering that at the middle school. It's certainly something that we could, but our numbers in French and Spanish are significantly lower than Latin. So, but I do understand that if students start in the middle school, then they're able to jump into a higher level when they're here, which would then push them to the opportunity to get to an AP class. But that isn't something that we've done.
I knew it was a wild card. I just want to sort of keep it on a burner. And I don't think we're doing this anymore, but we used to bus at least Freeport Middle School math kids who were in advanced math to the high school, and I just thought, could we potentially do that, even if there was just a handful of kids? It wouldn't be equitable with Durham 8th graders, of course, but if we just might want to pilot it, try it, see how much interest there might be. I would just love to see that conversation continue, because I know that we've heard from community members in the past that there's an interest in that, and if I had younger kids, I'd be asking the same questions.
And this is the first year that we have not bused 8th graders here, but it's usually a very small number. So last year we had 3 students come for math and for science. But we haven't, the question would be how many students would come. We are now at 2 full-time Latin teachers, and their schedules are both packed. So it would be not only just the impact to the 8th grade staff, but thinking about if we were to expand the Latin program here, which would be one, our teachers would love that, but it would mean finding another person. And one of our major challenges has been to find someone who's dual certified in multiple languages. That's getting harder and harder. And the other thing to consider is that most colleges in Maine have done away with teacher education programs for Latin. That has been really difficult. And so we're not finding an increase in teachers and a teacher demand or, a teacher supply for Latin courses. And our 2 Latin teachers are wonderful. We have a new Latin teacher this year. But that would be an impact for our staffing.
Other questions for Jen? Maddie?
This is my last one, I promise. This one just arose when you were talking about Region 10 offering English and social studies. That just raises questions for me about the curriculum that would be offered. How comparable would it be to what we offer here? Could that impact a student's ability to then, would it still be considered the proper prerequisite for upper level courses? And how would that all be worked out?
And it's a great question. I think it's what we would discuss because it would have to align with the curriculum for all 3 schools. I mean, one of the things is that we have the Common Core standards for our ELA classes that, that could be used by the Region 10 teachers. But it would definitely have to be a close collaboration of, what does that look like in terms of the skills, the text that they use, things like that. That could certainly differ from school to school, but the standards would have to align so that a student at Region 10 could then, if they decide they don't want to continue, that they would come into our class or Brunswick's or Mount Ararat's and seamlessly come back. But I think that will all be part of the conversation.
Other questions for Jen? All right. Oh, Becky has a question for you.
It's not a question for Jen, but I just want to clarify about the social studies curriculum review. We are working with MAEC around that. They're going to provide something that we have not received yet. So when you begin to review a curriculum, I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. This is not something that will be done by the end of the year. Okay, all right, just want to be clear in our expectations. Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
Great job all around. Okay, we have no personnel issues. And so we're back to public comment. We'll check the Zoom to see if we have anyone. Looking like we do not. Maybe a record? If we can get the motion in the next 30 seconds, I think we're in it under a minute and a half. Valley, motion to adjourn. Beth, thank you. We gotta go. I think this could be the first time we've ever literally voted once to adjourn. Okay, Jeremy?
Yes.
Candy?
Yes.
Lindsay?
Yes.
Jen?
Yes.
Susanna?
Yes.
Angela?
Yes.
Beth?
Yes.
Maura?
Yes.
I vote yes. Vali?
Yes.
Maddie?
Yes.
Okay. 7:59, guys. It's a record. Thank you, everybody. It's good because we're here every week now, so we should be shortening the meetings.